I wasn't too sure about that, but hey, it was her neck, not mine. Of course it meant Andy wanted to go over to the Clinton house first thing tomorrow, which wasn't possible. But Sarah promised him he was welcome anytime. She was even going to make a room for him so he could sleep over if he wanted. I thought that was a little too much, but Sarah cast me a look that said, "Don't disagree with me, I'm saying this for a reason." I was dying to ask her what the hell she thought she was doing, but didn't get the chance till after dinner. Stephanie was surprisingly nice to Sarah. Jennifer wasn't there though, she was out on another date. It was nearly 10 p.m., and at long last, we'd managed to get Andy to go to sleep. He was so hyper about making a friend, even though she was 10 years older, that he didn't want to go to sleep until she'd left. He refused, even though we'd read him 2 bedtime stories together, so at long last, I offered to sing him a lullaby. He wanted Sarah to do that, but she'd laugh saying, "Sorry kid, I can't sing for the life of me. But I'm sure Brittany is really good. Let's both lie down and listen, Kay?" And then Sarah had gracefully lain down beside my baby brother and pretended to fall asleep. Satisfied, Andy had then curled up into my side, demanding I sing that lullaby. I didn't know that many, and I had to think deep and hard. Surprisingly, the song I sang for him was the same one Alexander had sang for me. I didn't know I remembered it that well, but as I started humming the melody, the words found their way to my lips, and soon I was singing. I knew that Sarah had twitched in surprise and then stared at me with open mouth, but I'd chosen to ignore it. Andy was out like a light in 1 minute flat. That had to be a record. Back in my own room, I beat Sarah to it by springing my own question on her before she could ask me about the lullaby. I knew it was a familiar song to her, after all. Alexander said their mother sung that for them when they were little. Why the hell would you tell him you're making a room for him? I seriously doubt Stephanie or my dad will let him sleep over. It'll just disappoint him. Sarah sighed and plopped down on my bed, looking around my room curiously and noting that despite the fact that I had unpacked everything, the room still looked bare. I told him that because I want him to get used to the idea that there's another house out there for him to call home. "He's always welcome, and so are you," she said at long last. I stared at her for a moment. "I really appreciate that, miss, but..." She interrupted me. "I know you want to get away from here, Brittany. We just need to figure out how you can take Andy with you when you leave. There has to be a way to convince a judge that you should be his legal guardian, not that shitty stepmom or your dad who's never around." "Sarah? Sarah?" I said, feeling moved. "Are you saying that if we find a way..." I couldn't utter the words, my throat closing up. Did she really just say that me and Hay were welcome to live with them? At the Clinton house? I talked about it with Alexander Brittany. It was sort of his idea, actually. The house is big enough, even with Dennis moving in, and you'd hardly cost a thing anyway. It's just the legal aspect. He's looking into it with Dennis as we speak, probably. Suddenly, I was bawling my eyes out, glad that Sarah didn't hesitate to pull me into a tight embrace. "That's so nice of you, all of you," I hiccuped through my tears. Sarah was patting my back as I cried. "It's what best friends and lovers are for, hun," she said. Alexander wanted me and Hay both to live at his house? I couldn't believe it. These people, even though I'd known them for such a short while, had already succeeded in making me feel so much less alone. They'd make me feel welcome and loved, and they didn't hesitate to include Andy into all of this. After a while, I pulled back and still sniffling. I smiled at Sarah. Now, what was this about Dennis moving in? I had never seen Sarah blush before, but she came damn close to it now. She looked away from me and hid her face behind a curtain of hair. "Seriously, miss, I know he's cute and all, but first time he saw him, you went and stuck your tongue down his throat. Shut up!" "It wasn't like that," my friend exclaimed, and then she giggled. "He's just so... God, I'm just so in love, Britt." The moment I laid eyes on him, I just knew. He's the one, and the best part is, he knew it too. I smiled and hugged her again before I'd met Alexander. I wouldn't have believed in love at first sight. But now, a knock on the door and then Stephanie's voice. "Sarah, dear? Shouldn't you be on your way home? Your parents must be expecting you by now." Sarah cast me a look, then yelled back sweetly, "Oh heavens, I didn't know it was this late already. Thank you for the reminder, Mrs. B. Baker." She stood up gracefully from the bed and gave me another hug. "I'll see you tomorrow at school. Don't forget to pack another overnight bag, just in case, and your fancy clothes so I can help you prepare for the date." I promised I wouldn't forget. She was almost out the door when she spun around. "Where did you learn that lullaby?" Her expression was confused. "B," I shrugged. "Alexander sung it to me a few times. I guess I picked it up from him. Didn't realize I knew all the words until I sang it tonight." Sarah nodded. "You're lucky. He never sings for me, not even when I have nightmares." I winked. You have Dennis to do that now. Night, Brittany. With that, she was out the door, dancing down the stairs, light as a feather as always. I prepared my bag and then got ready for bed. Before I turned off the light, I grabbed my phone. I had several new messages. 3 from Dennis, telling me to tell Sarah to get home because he missed her. I hadn't expected the guy to be so clingy. 1 was from Alexander, and my heart literally skipped a beat when I read it. You can sing me to sleep tomorrow if you'd like. You are always welcome at my home, both of you. And don't cover up the hiki agramokwa. How had he known I'd been singing a lullaby? Had Sarah told him already? But as I checked the time on the text messages, I saw that he'd sent it just a few minutes after Andy had fallen asleep. It was eerie. Damn, man really seemed to be able to read minds, even over such a distance. Of course that was ridiculous. Still, I didn't reply to his message, but furiously thought, "You're going to pay for that hickey, Mr. Clinton." Oh, and the deal is off. If he really could read minds and he had been, then he'd know. I was sure he knew. I had a feeling he was laughing so hard right now that he'd fallen right out of his bed. I could only too vividly imagine Bob barging into his room to check if everything was all right. That image only a little distorted by the strange banging and moaning sound I heard in the background. I shivered and dispelled the image. I was really going insane, but just like last night, right before I drifted off to sleep, thinking pleasant thoughts of Alexander and me together, I felt that touch on my mind, soft and gentle as always. A caress that eased any last worries and pulled me into sleep, guiding me into pleasant dreams. Wednesday morning, it was Dennis and Sarah together who picked me up. Jennifer saw, and she scowled, but she said nothing. As I dropped my overnight bag on the back seat beside me, Dennis winked at me through the mirror. I thought I'd drive so I can take that bag straight home. How are you, Brittany? I'm all right, Dennis. You? He smirked and then cast a look at Sarah, who was fiddling with her makeup bag. I've never been so happy in my life. I never thought it would happen to me, but... He shrugged his shoulders. I'm glad it did. When we arrived at school, Sarah turned around in her seat. Come on, I'll work my magic on that hickey again. That way you don't have to wear that shirt. Must be really hot. I nodded in relief, but just as I was about to pull down the collar of the turtleneck shirt I was wearing, Jennifer sauntered into sight. She was fast approaching the car. What was she up to? Sarah saw my look and nodded. I'll do it during lunch in the bathroom. Come on, Brittany. Then the girl climbed out of the car after kissing Dennis. Jennifer watched us walk into school, a curious look on her face that told me she wasn't going to let this be. Obviously, she thought I was up to something and she was determined to find out what. And if she couldn't find out, she'd just make sure I was in so much trouble I couldn't do it anyway. During first period, Mr. Cooks, our grizzled teacher, kept casting me curious looks. It was almost as if he could see the hickey on my neck straight through the fabric of my shirt. Already I felt extremely warm and uncomfortable. Sarah cast me a mischievous look when she said goodbye to me in the hall, but no nasty surprises awaited me during second period. Bob didn't talk much, as was usual, but he cast me a warm look. Jennifer, on the other hand, stirred her minions up into a frenzy, so that they all started taunting me with the too warm shirt. It was annoying more than anything, but still. I was rather frustrated by the end of the period. I stalked all the way to third, where I planned on giving Alexander a piece of my mind. Of course, when I got there, I realized I couldn't very well do that with the entire classroom present. I sat down in the back next to Sarah, glowering at him and glaring every time he turned to smirk at me. The exchange didn't go unnoticed to the rest of the class, especially not to Jennifer. It wasn't fair that for a stereotyped slutty blonde bitch she was pretty smart. Alexander didn't come near me at all, and despite my anger, I noted that the physical tension was building again. How unfair. I wanted to be furious with him for forcing me to wear the stupid turtleneck. Yet most of the time, all I could think about was kissing him like yesterday, feeling his body pressed against mine. When class was over, Sarah helped me out by asking me some questions about the homework and insisted on discussing a project she had for art with me. By the time she was done talking, the entire classroom had emptied. Only Jennifer stood right in front of Alexander, pressing herself up against him. It was hilarious to see how he was backing away, till he hit the chalkboard, his eyes frantically trying to meet mine, begging me to get my creepy stepsister away from him. Jennifer knew she wasn't having the desired effect on him yet. She kept cooing at him, making flirty comments. For some reason, Alexander was scrunching up his nose, as if he smelled something he didn't like. I smirked at Sarah, who nodded, and we both made our way over to them. Alexander cast me a relieved look, obviously thinking I was going to free him from Jennifer. Instead, I met Jennifer's eyes and smiled at her. Good day. Bye, Mr. Clinton. Then I waltzed out the door with a laughing Sarah hot on my heels. Alexander's mortified look was something I wouldn't forget, ever. As we reached the cafeteria, Sarah wondered, You're not scared? He's going to fall for your stepsister's charm after all. I plopped down ungracefully in a chair next to Bob and shook my head, still laughing. No way. Did you see his face? I resolved into a fit of giggles that was amplified by Bob looking at me curiously. Sarah nodded with a smile. Just checking. I know Alex would never fall for a girl like your sis anyway. He deserved to be left in her clutches after what he did yesterday. Revenge was very sweet. Kate! Although my skin did feel unnaturally tight, I felt tired and a little drained. I was guessing it had something to do with not getting my dose of Alexander. Oh well, it was worth it to see him look so horrified when we left him with Jennifer. I finished my lunch in 10 minutes and was just about to get up with Sarah to go to the bathroom to finally fix that hickey. But a shadow fell over the table from behind me, and without looking, I knew it was Alexander. What do you want? I asked without looking up. My skin was tingling with all the tension again, and I had to fight down the urge to jump up and smother him in kisses. I want you in my classroom right now. He growled the words. Oh, he was really pissed off, wasn't he? I shrugged, still not looking up. For what reason, Mr. Clinton? Did I do something wrong? I smirked in Sarah's direction, enjoying myself just a little too much. Do you want attention again today, Brittany? Alexander said, not growling now, but still sounding very pissed off. Fine, I'm coming, I told him, at long last looking behind me to meet his eyes. Only then did I realize that his white dress shirt was soaked, showing off his muscular chest as it clung to his skin tightly. How the hell did that happen? Then I narrowed my eyes at the group of girls to our right that was openly ogling him as if he was eye candy. I got up out of my seat and followed Alexander hurriedly as he stalked out of the cafeteria. He obviously wasn't in the mood to wait for me. He took me through the empty hallways to his English classroom. I wondered how many classes he taught. Biology. He held open the door for me so I could enter first, and then he slammed it shut behind him, locking the door with an ominous click. I swallowed, but I wasn't worried he'd hurt me. I knew he'd never intentionally do that. Of course, Alexander looked a vision with his white shirt wet, the top few buttons undone. Some of his dark hair had gotten wet too, and it clung to his forehead. My eyes just had to follow the drop of water that ran down his face across his throat to disappear into the V of his shirt down his chest. Alexander's stormy gray eyes were nearly black again as he frowned at my face. Why didn't you help me? She damn near tried to rape me, Britt. I had to throw water on her to get her away from me. He stalked over to me, and I backed up into his desk, my skin shivering and my hands itching to follow the path of that single drop of water across his skin. The fierce, commanding presence, the glare, it made me aware of how masculine he was. He was used to getting his way, to being obeyed. His every move proved that. He trapped me between him and the desk, one hand on either side of me, but he didn't touch me. I smiled at him. You deserved it, Alexander. I met his angry eyes with my own without hesitation, showing him that for all his bluster, he didn't intimidate me. Deserved it. He growled. I laughed, feeling confident and happy at having managed to upset him as much as he had me. Yes, I yanked the collar of my shirt sideways to show him the hickey. Because of you, I have to wear this stupid, way too warm shirt. With my other hand, I poked his chest, ignoring the sparks that ignited at the touch. His black eyes followed the curve of my neck to rest on the red mark on my skin there, and then he grinned, that male satisfaction appearing on his face again. I told you not to cover it up a gramo short. He didn't look all that angry anymore, though. He didn't even look remorseful. I remembered how he'd somehow known about the lullaby last night, with that eerily accurate text message. Angry. I poked him in the chest again. I have to cover it up, you jerk. My stepmother and sister would kill me if they saw it. Oh, and remember, the deal is off. He quirked an eyebrow at me, amused now for some reason. So you said a run. I did not read your mind, though. I growled and ignored the absurdity of the whole situation. Then how the hell did you know to text me about the lullaby? Mind reading was impossible. Instead of replying, Alexander leaned into me, his breath filtering across my lips. I think we're even. You have a hickey, I've got a wet shirt, and we'll have a whole classroom of drooling girls here in a short while. That thought made a hot spark of jealousy stab through me. I did not want all those teenage girls staring at his chest. I did not read your mind, a gramo croy, he whispered, and I think you're really sexy when you're mad. After that, he pressed his lips to mine, kissing me fiercely and possessively. I moaned as my body responded, burning warmth spreading through me and pooling low in my body. I automatically spread my legs so he could step in between them. He lifted me effortlessly off the floor and set me down on the edge of his desk. He didn't stop at that, pushing me down further so I was on my back, his body hovering above mine. I was wrapping my legs around his hips, moaning at the contact of his erection as I pulled him closer to me. He broke the kiss to groan, his nearly black eyes roaming down my body as he skimmed a hand across the curve of my breasts. I arched my back as the touch rubbed against my nipple, the skin suddenly painfully tight there. Then he pulled aside the collar of my shirt, tracing his tongue over the hickey. "It's not a real mark, agremoshwa," he whispered hotly. A real mark wouldn't fade away, but this will do for now. My thoughts were too incoherent to understand what he was saying. My body was on such a high that it felt like I could burst at any moment. Those hands of his rubbing my breasts and his lower body straining against mine through the fabric of our clothes. Suddenly, he pulled away, and I whined at the loss of body contact. It made him chuckle as I glared at him from under drooping eyelashes. It wasn't fair that he had such a strong effect on me. It seemed one touch would send me down an endless spiral downwards where all I could do was crave for more. As I sat up and pulled my shirt straight, he smirked at me with satisfaction. "You are mine, Brittany." I shivered at the stark possessiveness in his voice, but despite the urge to tell him he didn't own me, a big part of me felt strongly appreciative of the power reflected in him. He was so very male and dominant and powerful. When I felt I had fixed myself enough to look presentable, I stood up. My legs were still wobbly, but I ignored that and closed the distance between us again. I kept my eyes firmly on his face and willed myself to look stern. "I told you the deal was off, Alexander," he glared at him. "So you did a gramokroi, but I did not break it." He was deadly serious as he replied, his eyes on my lips as I spoke. "You're not allowed to just kiss me like that anymore." Then I spun around and stalked towards the door, planning to leave and not think about him for the rest of the day until I had to see him again at our date. Alexander had something else in mind, though, because he stopped me at the door, an amused smile on his lips. "All right, I will ask your permission to kiss you first next time. Now, before you leave, let me fix your hair." Ask my permission to kiss? God, he was impossible. I shivered as he ran gentle fingers through my auburn curls, straightening my hair carefully so that no one could tell I'd just been heavily making out with him. "There, I will see you tonight. Agramokwa. Don't let Sarah bully you into wearing something uncomfortable." I heard a click as he unlocked the door and felt him brush his lips softly against my temple. He stepped away from me, running his hands through his own hair and then started rebuttoning his shirt. Shocked, I realized I had been responsible for undoing it. "Go, Britt. You don't want to be late for your next class," he said, amused at my stare. I nodded. "See you later, Alexander." Then I walked out the door into the luckily still empty hall. As the door fell shut behind me, I felt a soft touch on my mind, and then the image of Alexander and I on his desk, both of us naked as he drove my body to pleasure. That was not my thought. Asshole was seriously messing with my mind. I could hear Alexander laughing through the door. And damn it! Now, Sarah still hadn't covered up the hickey, so I had to walk around in that way to hot turtleneck even longer. I had only just enough time to pick up my books and bag, and then I had to go back to class. Sarah was by my side, though, with another knowing smile, although she was occasionally distracted by texting Dennis. Thanks to Alexander, I spent the rest of the day thinking of him and what we were going to do on our date. I was nervous about that now. What was he going to expect of me? Did he want sex? It certainly seemed that way, and despite our serious kissing, I wasn't sure I was ready for that so soon. "Hey, baby," a low voice suddenly said, right next to me. Shocked, I stepped back, away from Fort. Why did I keep walking into him? He was so bloody sneaky. "Leave me alone, Fort. I'm not in the mood for your crap," I snapped at him. Sidestepping so I could walk around him, I continued on my way with Sarah still by my side. She was shooting him angry glares, but Fort didn't seem impressed by that. "Not in the mood? That sounds promising," the guy said with a smirk. He grabbed my wrist and spun me around. "Fort, let her go," Sarah yelled angrily while I stared up at his face, imagining a dark wolf prowling behind those eyes of his. "Oh, shut up, freak. You and your witchy boyfriend don't scare me." Fort snapped at Sarah, pushing her away from us roughly. Sarah was slammed sideways into a row of lockers with a loud bang. Surely the teachers had heard that and would come running now. But as I looked around, all I saw was students gathering around to watch. Not a single adult around. Fort turned his attention back on me. "I know you want to be with me, baby." There's no need to play hard to get. I find it a rather tiring game. He hadn't let go of my wrist and pulled me into him so hard that I stumbled. You wouldn't talk this way if your dad was in town. Fort. He's going to punish you when he's back. My brother has already spoken to him, Sarah said, her voice controlled. It reminded me of Alexander when he was really mad. Fort laughed loudly, throwing his head back as if he found it really funny. There were several other guys in the crowd around us that laughed along. It was rather creepy. Sarah dear, my father's ancient history. I'm in control now. At those words, he wrapped an arm tightly around my waist. I could feel the hard planes of his body and, to my disgust, his arousal as well. I tried elbowing him hard since I wasn't in the position to knee him in the crotch, but it hurt me more. Then him. Damn, he was hard. Suddenly, Sarah was by my side, yanking the collar of my turtleneck down to reveal the hickey for everyone to see. She's taken Fort. You know my brother Alexander. If he finds out you touched her, he'll kill you, Sarah hissed. It was hard to understand what she was saying, and I only understood because she was right next to my ear. Still, Fort quickly let go of me and then stepped back, his eyes tight and filled with hatred. In the crowd, those same guys that had laughed now all wore frowns as if they too had heard what Sarah had said. No one else seemed to notice, though. They were all busy speculating about who had given me the hickey. A lot of them actually thought it had been Sarah. One voice stood out, though. I knew it. I knew you were hiding something. Jennifer? Of course she had to see this. See? Come, Brittany, let's go. A soft tug on my hand was enough to get my feet moving. I followed Sarah through the halls to our next class. At the back of the crowd, I spotted Mr. Cooks, our grizzled math teacher. Why didn't he step in if he'd been here all along? I'm sorry, Sarah, but with Thomas still away, my hands are bound, the fearsome-looking man said to my friend. Sarah just nodded as if she understood his reasons. That left me more questions than answers. Clearly, Fort had some sort of control over the teachers, or maybe just Mr. Cooks. Control that usually lay with Fort's father. But since he was gone at the moment, it had passed on to him. I couldn't think of anything that would make sense, though. Nor the fact that those guys in the crowd had definitely heard what Sarah had said, even though she'd been so quiet that I had trouble hearing it, and I had been right next to her. Did they all have super hearing? Sarah didn't want to explain anything when I asked, though, and I couldn't very well ask her what was on my mind anyway during class. So soon enough, last period rolled around, and I happily hurried to the biology classroom. Maybe I could pry some answers from Alexander after class was done. When I got to the class, however, Alexander wasn't there. Instead, Mr. Clayton stood there. Where did Alexander go? Was he sick? Confused, I sat down in the back as usual, all by myself. I'm replacing Mr. Clayton for today, class, because he had to take his younger brother, Bob Clayton, to the hospital, Mr. Clayton explained briefly. After that, he cut right to the chase and started explaining things about the subject we were working on in his boring, monotone voice. I hoped Bob was all right. It must have been an emergency or something. Class went agonizingly slow without Alexander, and it was that way for everyone. I constantly heard people sigh, and no one seemed to be looking at the chalkboard. Instead, we were all sort of doodling or staring out the window. I was the first out the door when the final bell rang. That was a first for everyone there, obviously, and I heard them whisper amongst each other as I left them behind. Sarah said to meet her outside at the car. Dennis would be waiting for us. He was, leaned against the hood of the car, playing with his phone. As I reached him, he opened his arms for a hug, and I gladly complied. There you all go. Chapter 10. It takes a while because I have to edit things. The next chapters are all written already, but I'm really unhappy with some of the background details in it, so I'm redoing that. Please vote and comment. It definitely helps to motivate me to write faster and update faster. Rough day, Brittany? He asked with a smile. I nodded. Yeah, run in with Fort. He called you a witch and then tossed Sarah into a row of lockers. Dennis froze and stared at me. He called me a witch? I shrugged. Yeah, I don't see why, though. You look nothing like a witch. He laughed. Thanks. Is Sarah okay? But just at that moment, she appeared, bouncing up to us and jumping in his arms to smother him with kisses. Yeah, she's fine, I told him, although I doubted he was listening. Instead, I got in the car. I had just spotted Jennifer and Fort coming out of the school. Fort wasn't looking at us, but Jennifer was, and she had that evil look on her face that told me trouble was going to find me soon. Are you sure, Sarah? I asked hesitantly as I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I was wearing a skin-tight dark red dress. It was the color of blood. The dress wrapped around my torso elegantly and accentuated my breasts with a narrow split down the front to reveal the inner slopes. The dress left my back bare but flared out around the hips. If I twirled around, the skirt would form a perfect circle around me. It reached till just past my knees with layers to show darker red and black underneath. Of course, Sarah had also managed to get me into heels. I couldn't help it. They were just so pretty that I had to try them on. Once on, Sarah hadn't let me take them off again. They were red too, darker than the dress, and ribbons tied them to my feet that wrapped around my legs in elegant crosses all the way to my knees. They were so dainty and small that they made my already small feet look tiny. Alexander said to wear something comfortable. I told my friend for the umpteenth time, but I knew she wouldn't listen. To be honest, I thought I looked pretty in the mirror, and the heels and dress might not have been all that comfortable. At least they made me feel really sexy and feminine. I liked how the low but very narrow plunging neckline accentuated my mother's angel wing necklace too. Sarah sat me down on a chair and started on my hair and makeup, twirling strands into curls and pinning them on my head in a fancy pattern. It looked really pretty and made me think of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. "You look stunning already, Brittany, and I'm not even done yet," exclaimed Sarah as I expressed my doubts again. I was really nervous about tonight. Would Alexander like the dress? Or would he think I was too young after all? She did my makeup very lightly, just some eyeliner and eyeshadow to accentuate the color of my eyes. She said I didn't need anything else, and when I asked her about the hickey, she'd laughed. "Honey, you'll be with Alexander. He'll want to be able to see it. No need to hide it now. There, you're all done. Let's see if the boys downstairs approve." She made me wait in her bedroom while she called Dennis and Bob to come upstairs. Bob was fine. Apparently the hospital thing had been excused so he and Alexander could leave school earlier. Why they had to leave early, Bob wouldn't explain. When Dennis came in, he whistled loudly. "You clean up real nice, Brittany. Nice work, baby." Then he just totally turned around to hug Sarah and kiss her. Bob shook his head at the antics and then smiled at me. "He's right though, you look amazing. Alexander is going to have a hard time keeping himself from eating you alive." I stared at Bob and felt just a tiny bit scared by that comment. Who complimented someone by saying they might get eaten alive? That's just plain weird. "Go on downstairs then. Brittany, Alexander is waiting at the bottom." I looked at the three people in the room and then breathed in deeply. All right, time to face Alexander. As I slowly descended the grand flight of stairs, I felt a bit like I was in a movie. Alexander was waiting for me at the bottom, and he wore a handsomely tailored suit, black with a dark red tie. I had the feeling that was Sarah's doing. He looked breathtaking, and his stormy gray eyes stared up at me filled with unadulterated desire. That sent hot shivers down my spine, and I nearly stumbled on the last step, his arms catching me before I could fall. He smirked at me. "Falling for me already, Britt?" Blushing, I shook my head. "I'm just not used to heels. I told you to wear something comfortable, gramo kroi." His voice was suave as he slid an arm around my waist and started guiding me out of the house. My heels clicked on the marble floor and then on the cobblestones outside. "You know what Sarah is like? I bet she bullied you into wearing that tie so that we would match," I told Alexander with a smile. We'd reached his car, and like a gentleman, he opened the door for me before running to the other side and getting in himself. "Oh yes, she did. She knows red is one of my favorite colors. You look very edible in red," he said when he got inside and started the engine. Seems like Bob's comment wasn't that weird after all. If Alexander thought I looked edible, "You have Indian blood in you, haven't you?" he asked me suddenly. I nodded, surprised that he had noticed. "Yes, my mother was Cherokee. I thought you just had a nice tan from the summer," Alexander explained with a look at the narrow neckline and the cleavage showing. "Or that's not a tan, it's your natural skin color." Blushing, I nodded. It was the one thing Jennifer had never called ugly. I had the distinct feeling, in fact, that she'd always been jealous of my skin. "Where are we going, Alexander?" I asked him, scanning our surroundings. Not that I recognized where we were going. After all, I still didn't know the town all that well. We just turned into a small road, out of town and into the forest that lay around it. "It's a surprise à Gramokoi," he said with a smirk that told me he was really enjoying this. His accent had gone back to sounding Irish, and I felt happy about that. It was a sign he felt comfortable around me, wasn't it? After a few more minutes, the road had wound. It's way up, and then lights came into sight. Alexander helped me get out of the car and lead me down a small path to the opening of a small meadow. The meadow was covered with lanterns hanging from every branch, lighting up the place like a fairy tale. In the middle lay a large plaid, spread out and weighted down on the corners so the wind, however slight, couldn't take hold of it. Just beyond the blanket was a small spring with crystal clear water. It was very shallow, and candles had been placed around it on every flat rock visible. There were floating candles in the water too. I could only stare in wonder. Had he really gone through all the trouble of making the meadow look like this? Do you like it, Agramokroy? Alexander whispered in my ear. It's so beautiful, I told him softly, my voice catching in my throat. I almost wanted to cry because I felt so special. A soft push in my back made me realize he wanted me to go to the blanket and sit down. I blushed and walked over to it, happy to sink down on the softness and hide my legs underneath the wide skirt of the dress. It was colder outside than I expected. Alexander had been carrying a large picnic basket with him, and I felt silly for not having noticed it before. He sat down beside me and started unpacking it, revealing plates and glasses and a bottle of sparkling champagne. Then he took out steaming, warm pastries and other delicious-smelling food. He smiled at my wide eyes as he piled food on a single plate. Who knew Danis was so good at cooking? Then he handed me the plate and stretched his legs out behind me, so that part of my side was leaning against them. It felt nice and warm, and immediately I didn't feel cold anymore. As I took a bite of the food, I couldn't help but sigh at the explosion of taste on my tongue. This was absolutely divine. I took a small bit between my fingers and reached over to him. You have to try this. It's heavenly. His eyes followed my hand, and then he obediently leaned forward to allow me to put the food in his mouth. I shivered as his lips brushed my fingers. He chewed slowly and then swallowed. He should go professional with food like that, he murmured. His eyes were still on me as I tried more of the food, watching my expression avidly as if it was the most interesting thing in the world. Aren't you gonna eat? I asked after a while, feeling uncomfortable with him watching me eat. He shrugged. I don't eat much agromokoi. Would you like some wine? He started pouring the clear champagne into 2 wine glasses and handed me one without waiting for a reply. Surely you must eat something, Alexander? I frowned at him as I put my plate away and accepted the glass he handed me. Don't worry about me, Britt. I will explain something to you in a short moment. Let me enjoy watching you for just a little longer, Alexander said, his voice soft and amused, a twinkling in his gray eyes as he looked at my face as if trying to memorize every little detail. Blushing, I looked away and took a few sips from the champagne. Why was he looking at me like that? Was he afraid I would disappear? Or run away? His fingertips tilted my chin up so I would meet his eyes. I just want to remember you as you are now. I stared at him and suddenly worried that he was going to be the one to run away. He changed his mind. He didn't want to lose his job after all. I want to remember you as you are before I tell you my secret, Agramokroi. Secret? Was he going to explain me about the mind-reading thing? I already guessed that much, hadn't I? And I hadn't run away screaming, or declared him a lunatic. Since I had finished eating, Alexander repacked all the food items back into the basket and pulled out a plate of strawberries. I had told him those were my favorite fruit. If it was up to me, I'd eat them every day. Dessert, he smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes this time. He seemed nervous somehow. Was whatever secret he wanted to tell me really that big that he was afraid to tell me? I popped a strawberry in my mouth and stared at him curiously. You know you can tell me anything, Alexander. I know, Britt, but this is... Well, you'll understand once I've told you, I hope. He shifted closer to me and ran his fingers over the hickey on my neck. It wasn't on purpose. A run, I lost control. I shrugged, even as I shivered at his touch. I'm not mad about it anymore. For some reason, it scared off Fort. Good, he nodded. Then hesitating, as if he thought of how to phrase something, he said, Do you really believe I can read your mind? Oh, so it was about the mind reading after all. Either you're really good at reading facial expressions or you can read minds. Although, I thought about how to explain the text message from the night before. Yes, he prompted. That message you sent me last night? About the lullaby and the hickey and hay and I always being welcome? Why did you send that? How did you know I had just sung that lullaby? That's not even mind reading, that has to be, I don't know, telepathic. Or were you secretly standing outside my bedroom window or something? Alexander nodded. Telepathic is the word I'd use. I was at home. Bob and Danis can testify to that. But we have this connection. Britt, I don't even mean to listen in, but, well, as with the lullaby, I just heard. I shivered as he confirmed that I wasn't imagining those things, at least. I felt almost relieved about that. Do you have that with a lot of people? I wondered. He shook his head. No, just you Agramutwai. Sarah is the telepathic one, not me. Or at least, I'm not very strongly telepathic. Sarah is telepathic? Oh, no wonder she always looks like she knows everything. It exclaimed. I was a little worried that I wasn't freaking out about this yet, but I supposed it was because I already knew this, sort of. Alexander, have you? When you, read my mind, can you put feelings or thoughts in it too? I asked, as I thought about all the times I felt a soft caress on my mind, filling me with warm feelings. I remembered the image of us on the desk, too,